He was already sitting on the cold bench when she walked past him the first time. Gerald Holt had chosen that bench deliberately. It sat directly outside the entrance of Meridian Plaza on 5th Avenue, the same building where his son Connor worked on the 32nd floor, the same building where Connor had told him, with more excitement than Gerald had heard from him in years, that he was bringing his fiancée Lauren for lunch that Friday afternoon. Gerald had arrived 2 hours early. He was wearing a coat he had purchased from a thrift store on Tuesday for $4. Dirty gray, 2 sizes too large, 1 button missing. He had scuffed his shoes against the concrete until the shine was completely gone. He had not shaved in 4 days, which at 67 gave him exactly the look he was going for. He had a paper coffee cup on the ground beside the bench with a few coins in it, borrowed from his own pocket. He looked exactly like what he wanted to look like, a man the world had forgotten. He had been doing this for 40 minutes when Lauren Mercer walked past him the first time. He recognized her from the photographs Connor had shown him over dinner 3 weeks ago. Young, mid-30s, dark hair, the kind of composed professional bearing that said she had worked hard to be taken seriously and intended to keep it that way. She was walking fast, phone to her ear, a bag over one shoulder, clearly running slightly behind schedule. She walked past the bench without looking at him. Gerald noted it but said nothing. People walked past homeless individuals on city streets hundreds of times a day without looking. That was not a character test. That was just Tuesday. She went inside. Gerald waited. 11 minutes later, she came back out. She was off the phone now, checking her watch. Connor was apparently not downstairs yet. She stood near the entrance, a few feet from Gerald's bench, and waited. Gerald coughed. It was a real cough. The cold air had been getting to him, but he let it go longer than necessary. She glanced at him, then looked back at her phone. He coughed again, then said, to nobody in particular, in a voice that was tired and rough around the edges, "Excuse me. Sorry about that." She looked over. "Are you okay?" "Yes, ma'am. Just the cold." "I'm fine." She looked at him for a moment. Then she opened her bag, took out a small bottle of water, walked the 4 steps between them, and held it out. "Here," she said. "I have another one." Gerald looked at the water, then at her. "That's very kind of you. Thank you." "Of course." She went back to her spot near the entrance. Gerald unscrewed the cap and took a sip and watched her over the rim of the bottle. She had not made a production of it. She had not looked around to see if anyone noticed. She had just done it the way people do things when doing good is simply their reflex and not their performance. He filed that away. Connor came out of the building 7 minutes later, kissed Lauren on the cheek, and the two of them walked up the street together. Gerald watched them go and turned the water bottle in his hands and thought about what he had seen and what he had not yet seen. One small kindness was not enough. Not for what Connor was about to do. Not for what Gerald was about to trust. He came back the next Friday. Same bench, same coat, same scuffed shoes. This time he arrived only 30 minutes early because he had a better sense of the timing now. He brought a small paper bag with 2 crackers in it and ate them slowly on the bench the way a man eats when he is making food last. Lauren arrived at 12:43. She was alone this time, earlier than Connor, and she sat down on a different bench near the entrance to wait. After a few minutes, she looked over at Gerald in the way people sometimes do when they have seen someone before and are deciding whether to acknowledge it. She acknowledged it. "You were here last week," she said. Not accusatory, just observational. "I'm here most weeks," Gerald said. "Do you have somewhere warm to sleep?" It was such a direct question that Gerald blinked. Most people who engaged at all did so carefully around the subject, never quite landing on it. She had gone straight to the center of it. "I manage," he said. "That's not what I asked." He looked at her. "The shelter on Morrison Street when there are beds. Otherwise, I know some spots." She was quiet for a moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper and stood up and walked over and held it out to him. He took it. It was a handwritten list. 3 addresses. 3 phone numbers. Notes beside each one in small, neat handwriting. One said open 7 days, no ID required. Another said hot meals twice daily. Ask for James at the door. The third said warmest option. Furthest but worth it. I work with a nonprofit 2 evenings a week, she said. These are the places I know actually help. The third one is the best, but people don't always know about it. Gerald looked at the list in his hand. It was not something she had pulled from a website 5 minutes ago. It was worn at the fold lines. She had been carrying it. She had written it by hand and been carrying it in her bag. Ready. You carry this with you, he said. I meet a lot of people who need it, she said simply. She went back to her bench. Gerald sat with that list in his hand for a long time. Connor arrived. They went to lunch. Gerald folded the list and put it in his coat pocket and sat on that bench and felt something shift in the way he had been thinking about Lauren Mercer. But he was not done. Because one thing Gerald Holt had learned in 40 years of building a company that employed 6,000 people was that kindness under comfortable circumstances told you something, but kindness under pressure told you everything. He needed to apply some pressure. He came back the following Friday, and this time he did not wait for her to come to him. If you are hooked on this story right now, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button because it only gets bigger from here. Connor had mentioned to Gerald that he and Lauren always ate at the same Italian place on Bedford Street on Fridays. Gerald was already there when they arrived, not on a bench this time but sitting on the ground outside the restaurant, back against the brick wall, cup in front of him. He watched them come down the street together, laughing about something, Connor's hand at the small of her back. They were 10 feet from the restaurant entrance when Lauren stopped walking. Connor took 2 more steps before he realized she wasn't beside him. You okay? 1 second, she said. She walked toward Gerald. Gerald kept his eyes down the way he had practiced. Hey, she said, crouching down to his level. Crouching, not standing over him. It's cold out here. Are you eating today? I'm all right, he said. I didn't ask if you were all right. I asked if you were eating. There she was again, straight to the center. Not yet today, he admitted, keeping his voice in character. She stood up and turned to Connor. Can we get him something before we go in? Connor looked at Gerald. Something moved across his face that Gerald could not fully read. Yeah, of course. What do you want? He said, directing the question at Gerald. You don't have to do that, Gerald said. We want to, Lauren said. What do you like? They have good soup in there. Soup is fine. Thank you. Connor went inside to order. Lauren stayed outside. She sat down on the step near Gerald, not on the clean step at the top, on the lower one, closer to his level. You were outside Meridian Plaza the last 2 Fridays, she said. He looked at her sharply. She had recognized him across 2 separate locations. I get around, he said carefully. My name is Lauren, she said. Gerald, he said before he could stop himself. His real name, out of his mouth before he had calculated it. Gerald. She repeated it like she was making sure she had it right. How long have you been on the street? A while. Do you have family? That question landed somewhere he was not prepared for. He had constructed the situation entirely around testing her and had not adequately prepared for being genuinely questioned. He thought of Connor inside ordering soup right now. He thought of Connor at 7 years old asking Gerald to come to his school play and Gerald canceling because of a board meeting and the look on Connor's face that Gerald still carried. A son, he said. Somewhere. Does he know where you are? We lost touch. Lauren looked at the street, then back at him. I'm sorry. That's a hard thing. Whose fault it was is complicated, Gerald said, and that part was not a performance at all. She looked at him with an expression that was not pity. It was something quieter and more respectful than pity. It usually is, she said. Connor came back with a container of soup, a bread roll, and a coffee. He handed it to Gerald directly, not via Lauren, which Gerald noted and appreciated. Thank you, son, Gerald said, and the word came out with more feeling than he intended. Connor looked at him for a half-second longer than the moment required. Then he nodded. Take care of yourself. They went inside. Gerald sat on that step with soup he had not needed and coffee he was actually glad to have in the cold and felt the architecture of his own test collapsing on top of him. He had come here to learn about Lauren Mercer. What he had not anticipated was what the test was revealing about himself. He went home that evening to his house in Greenwich, poured a glass of scotch he didn't finish, and sat in his study for 2 hours thinking. Then he called Connor. "I need to tell you something," he said when Connor picked up, "and I need you to let me get through all of it before you respond." Connor was quiet for a moment. "That's not a great way to start a conversation, Dad." "I know. Just let me finish." He told him everything. The bench, the coat, the thrift store, the 3 Fridays, the list she carried, the soup, the conversation, all of it. Connor did not speak for a very long time after Gerald finished. "You tested her," Connor said finally. His voice was flat in a way Gerald recognized as dangerous. "Yes. Without telling me." "Yes. Without telling her." "Connor." She sat on a cold step next to a man she thought was homeless and asked him about his son, Connor said, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. "And his son was you, testing her. From 20 feet away." Gerald closed his eyes. "I know. Why?" The word came out with everything behind it. "Why wasn't my word enough? Why wasn't my judgment enough for you to just trust me?" "Because I have made mistakes in this family that I cannot undo," Gerald said. "And you are the most important thing I have not ruined yet, and I was terrified of being the reason something went wrong." Silence on the line. "That is not a good enough reason," Connor said. "No," Gerald agreed. "It isn't." Another silence. Longer. "She's going to find out," Connor said. "I'm not keeping this from her. I know. I'm not asking you to. And she's going to be upset. She has every right to be."
I'm upset, Dad.
"I know, son. I know you are." Connor exhaled slowly. "I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up. Gerald sat in his study and looked at the list Lauren had written by hand and carried in her bag for people she might meet who needed it, and thought about what kind of person prepares for strangers that way. What kind of person crouches on a cold step instead of standing over someone? What kind of person asks direct questions because she respects people enough not to dance around them? He thought about what Connor had said. She is going to find out. Gerald picked up his phone and called Connor back. "I want to apologize to her myself," he said when Connor answered. "Not through you. Directly. In person. She deserves that." Connor was quiet. "I'll ask her." The meeting happened 4 days later in Connor's apartment. Lauren sat across from Gerald in clothes she had clearly not dressed up in, which he respected. She looked at him with an expression that he now recognized as her default, straight to the center, no performance. "You're the man from the bench," she said. "Yes." "And the step outside the restaurant." "Yes." She looked at him for a moment. "You're Connor's father." "I am." "Gerald." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "You used your real name." "I didn't mean to. It came out." Something moved across her face. Not softening exactly. More like she was filing something away. "What were you looking for?" she asked. "I wanted to know who you were when nobody important was watching." "And you carried a handwritten list of shelters in your bag," he said. "You crouched down instead of standing over someone. You asked direct questions because you respected the person enough not to pretend." He paused. "You told my son to get food for a stranger before going inside for your own lunch." She looked at her hands, then at him. "I'm angry," she said. "I want you to know that. Not at what you found. At how you went about it." Connor deserved better than a test he didn't know he was in. "And so did I." "You're right," Gerald said. "Both of those things are true, and I have no defense for either of them." She looked at him for a long time. "Connor told me what you said. About him being the most important thing you haven't ruined yet." Gerald said nothing. "That's a heavy thing to carry," she said. "Being someone's last chance at getting something right. I shouldn't have put it on him."
No.
"But I understand why you did." She paused. "I'm going to marry your son, Gerald. Not because you approved me. Because I love him and he is a good man. But I want you to know something." She leaned forward slightly. "The next time you have a question about who I am, you ask me. Directly. To my face. I will answer anything you want to know. You don't have to hide to find out who I am." Gerald looked at this woman his son had chosen. This direct, prepared, unperformative, carrying a list for strangers woman. I believe you, he said. Good. She stood up and extended her hand. Then let's start over. My name is Lauren. He stood and shook it. Gerald, it's a genuine pleasure this time. Connor, standing in the kitchen doorway where he had been listening to all of it, made a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. And in that apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, something that had been crooked for a long time between a father and a son began, slowly and carefully and with no guarantees, to straighten. If this story got to you, please like this video right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because there is always another story coming and you do not want to miss it. Drop a comment below and tell me, was Gerald wrong to run the test, or do you understand why he did it? I want to hear every opinion. See you in the next one.